The Color of Destiny, a secret unraveled in harmony. California, the unspoken truth. When Sarah Jensen first held her newborn triplets Ethan, Caleb, and Maya, profound silence descended upon the delivery room at St. Jude's Hospital in Harmony, California. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of a miracle, but a tense, heavy void. Doctors exchanged guarded, uncertain glances. Sarah's mother, Eleanor Vance, stood frozen by the window, her mind refusing to register the reality before her eyes. The babies in Sarah's arms, though undeniably hers, bore no resemblance to her, not even close. Their beautiful, deep brown skin was a stark contrast to Sarah's fair complexion, and their features hinted at a heritage far removed from her own. Within seconds, the sterile hospital air was thick with sharp, incredulous whispers. How could this be possible? A young nurse, Brenda, asked the attending physician, Dr. Hayes, her voice barely a breath. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, the confusion and the sudden, paralyzing fear stealing her oxygen. Tears welled up, but the fierce, primal love for her three tiny miracles, her children, held her together. Eleanor's initial shock quickly curdled into a cold, unsettling suspicion. The silence was broken by the frantic beeping of monitors, a counterpoint to the wild rumors that began to spread like wildfire down the hallways and into the hospital staff lounge. Lies, betrayal, and hidden truths were the narrative of the hour. Everyone wanted answers, but Sarah, clutching her babies, had none to give. She looked at Ethan, Caleb, and Maya, three perfect beings, and swore to protect them at all costs. From the judgment in the eyes of strangers and, most painfully, from the doubt in her mother's. The next 10 days in Sarah's quiet, ranch-style home on Magnolia Lane felt long and painful. Silence was the new language, heavy and accusatory. Eleanor retreated into a chilly, distant watchfulness, every averted gaze a fresh stab of pain for Sarah. She sang lullabies to her babies, her voice trembling, finding solace only in their innocent coos, her only light in a world that felt increasingly dark. The media, catching wind of the impossible birth, began to circle, their presence near her house a constant, invasive threat. Sarah shut the blinds, sealing her family inside a fragile, besieged world. The past rises, the hospital tests, DNA analysis, blood work, genetic scans, all returned inconclusive or simply unexplained. The science couldn't account for the impossible, and the medical community retreated into hushed, official statements, calling it an extremely rare, almost mythic genetic anomaly. The public's judgment, fueled by online commentary and relentless tabloid headlines: White Mom gives birth to black triplets, scandal or science, was brutal. Sarah's only defense was the sheer, unwavering love she held for her children. Day and night, she stayed by their side, but the constant, unspoken anguish was watching Eleanor, her own mother, who could barely bring herself to look at the babies. "I raised you better, Sarah," Eleanor had whispered one night, her voice heavy with cold disappointment, a phrase that tore Sarah apart. Then, on the 10th morning, the tense equilibrium shattered. Eleanor walked into the nursery, her hands visibly trembling, holding an old cedar wood box Sarah had never seen. It was dusty, secured with a tarnished brass clasp, filled with faded photos and brittle, sealed letters. "What is that, Mom?" Sarah asked, confused, pulling herself up from the floor where she'd been sitting, cradling Ethan and Caleb. Eleanor sank onto the rocking chair, her eyes overflowing with tears that had been held back for 10 agonizing days. "There's something you need to know, Sarah. Something our family buried a long time ago." Her voice shook as old memories, the kind that never truly die, but merely hide in the deepest shadows, began to resurface. Sarah's breath hitched. She could feel the charged energy of a powerful truth in the air. Eleanor slowly unclasped the box. Inside, resting atop a stack of documents, was a small, sepia-toned photograph from the 1940s. It showed a young woman, strikingly like Sarah, her grandmother, Martha Vance, standing beside a baby. The baby, swaddled tightly, was clearly of African American heritage, just like Ethan, Caleb, and Maya. Eleanor's voice was a ragged whisper as the story poured out. Your grandmother, Martha, she had a child, a son. She never told anyone, not even her husband, my father. Eleanor confessed, her head bowing in shame and grief. She had a love affair with a man whose family was from Louisiana. When she got pregnant, the world then, it wouldn't have allowed it. Her father forced her to give the baby up for adoption, to a family that moved away, a family who promised to raise him with love, in another state. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face. The shame, the secrecy, it almost destroyed her. We never, ever spoke of it. It was buried, along with all her pain. Sarah's heart pounded a furious rhythm against her ribs. She couldn't speak, her throat constricted by the weight of generations. A reunion across generations. Eleanor, driven by her own restless heart and the profound, unshakable love she saw in Sarah's eyes for her babies, had not been idle in the silence. While Sarah slept, Eleanor had secretly taken a more extensive DNA test, sending samples from herself and the triplets to a specialized lab, one that analyzed deep lineage and genetic markers. She couldn't live with the doubt, and the medical mystery wasn't enough. She needed her truth. What she revealed next was the true climax. Sarah, the DNA test. It came back this morning. Your babies. They're connected to him, to Martha's son. The lineage is, the connection is there. The triplets' unique genetics were not a random anomaly, but a spectacular, long-delayed act of destiny. Sarah's great-grandmother had carried the dormant genes for darker skin, a rare, deep-seated genetic marker that, through the sheer statistical improbability of triple non-identical birth, had manifested in all three of her babies. They were a genetic reunion with a forgotten branch of the family tree, a forgotten son. Generations removed, the impossible triplets were simply the physical embodiment of a family's greatest, deepest secret, now revealed. Eleanor wept, her doubt and anger melting into crushing, agonizing regret. My suspicions, my coldness, I broke your heart, honey. I'm so sorry. I let ignorance and the past blind me. Sarah, holding her three children, who were now the proof of a powerful, long-lost love, felt the pain of the last 10 days recede. The mystery was no longer a science scandal, it was a miraculous family fate. She embraced her mother, their tears mixing, washing away the shame and judgment. Love had conquered disbelief. The eternal signature. The hospital, once the center of hushed gossip, now celebrated a medical and familial miracle. Dr. Hayes held a press conference confirming the extraordinary genetic lineage. The global headlines shifted from scandal to generational lineage confirmed. Triplets rewrite family history. Sarah and her babies, Ethan, Caleb, and Maya, became symbols of hope, unity, and the incredible, enduring power of genetics and, more profoundly, the human spirit. Strangers from around the world sent letters, prayers, and gifts to their small house on Magnolia Lane. Sarah's story, shared humbly and with grace on national talk shows, taught millions that love doesn't ask about color, it asks about soul. Eleanor, once crippled by shame, became a passionate advocate for diversity and equality, often telling reporters, I almost lost my daughter and my grandchildren to my own ignorance. The old, sepia photograph of Martha and her secret baby was framed and hung in a place of honor, right next to the triplets' newborn photos. Generations were finally united. The days that followed were filled with peace. Forgiveness was their family's new heartbeat. Sarah often caught Eleanor gazing at the triplets, her face softened with love, a look that silently screamed, I was wrong, but thank you for teaching me. Sarah, looking at her three beautiful, diverse children, finally understood. Their existence had proved something powerful and divine, that love always finds its way home, even across lifetimes, and sometimes. The most profound truth is the one that science can't explain, but the heart understands completely. As Ethan, Caleb, and Maya grew. Their laughter echoed through the house, a constant reminder that love, not logic, had won. Love does not follow rules, it creates its own miracles.